I want to thank everybody for joining us this week in Elderwerks celebration of veterans and providing all this valuable information for veterans during Veterans Week. Uh, yeah, I can't say it's been any time in recent history that I've felt the need to actually prepare a presentation for VA healthcare, but a lot has changed. And I hope to cover many of the changes over the course of this presentation. And I also want to reassure people, if you were previously denied for VA healthcare, I would strongly recommend staying with it, and you may find you may be eligible for it where previously maybe you weren't. So getting right into it, what we're going to be talking about is VA healthcare. How do I get it and what does it cover? And I'm Mike Iwaniki. I'm the superintendent of the Veterans Assistance Commission in McHenry County. I'm an accredited service officer. That is somebody who went through special training and is certified by various organizations and accredited by the VA General Counsel. There are some current laws in effect that basically, if you're going to be talking to people one-on-one about VA benefits, that person needs to be accredited, and those people should be able to call up their accreditation number for you if you were to ask. But jumping right into it, let's see what we're actually going to be doing here. I keep reaching for my computer because I forget that it's not on my computer. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is basically not just how do you get into healthcare, but some of the changes to healthcare. A little known benefit, you can go to urgent care. We'll discuss that. And of course, we'll talk about mental health, which is a hot button topic these days. So jumping right into it, let's get right to eligibility. So there's a lot of things you're looking at when you're talking about eligibility, and this is just a sampling of what the eligibility is. But something that even today, people come back to me. The number one really important thing about VA healthcare and how you're eligible for it, you had to serve in the United States military. There are a few rare exceptions for individuals who are our allies during World War II, and there aren't too many of those people anymore, but there aren't really any now. So you would need to actually have served in the United States military. And, quick story, I actually had someone who served in the Axis powers, the enemy's army during World War II, who was asking how they can get VA health care. And I'm sorry, you were in the wrong side. But there's a lot of different things that you have to consider when you're looking at VA healthcare and eligibility. Now, jumping right into the eligibility end of it, this is where I get to talk about what happened in August of 2022. So in August of 2022, the president signed into law the PACT Act. Now, the biggest takeaway people took from the PACT Act is a lot of conditions, especially if someone served in the desert during the conflict, Desert Storm Forward. If they served in the desert, a lot of activity of presumptive conditions related specifically to burn pits were added to the presumptive list. There were also a couple things that were added to people who were part of nuclear testing, and a couple things that were added for Agent Orange in a number of countries that the military conceded were actually used outside of Vietnam. Those are the biggest changes that people focused on. Well, really didn't get the focus that really needed to be focused on was the fact that they added language in there that told the VA they have to change how they look at environmental exposures, being exposed to toxic chemicals or toxic environments. And the VA had to come up with procedures, especially in the claims end, on how they're going to evaluate what those toxins were and how they impacted individuals as far as service-connected disability, which is a whole nother presentation in itself. The crossover is the VA healthcare also had to look at those things, and it opened up eligibility for a lot more people. So individuals who, when I first started, it was like our boot camp company commanders told us when we were in the service, you do well, you serve honorably, and the VA will take care of you for the rest of your life. And that was true up until January of 2003, when Congress added language, a couple simple words, pending financial, which is if the VA had enough funding to take care of you, they would. Otherwise, they can't. And that's exactly what happened in 2003. The language had been there for a while, but they didn't have the funding to take care of everybody. So they broke everything down into priority groups. And the first priority all the way down to the 8th priority. And we're going to go over that. So with that in mind, the PACT Act was more than simply disability. It also impacted eligibility for health care. And these are some of the things in there. And of course, there was so much of it, I couldn't fit on the page, so it got smaller and smaller. But the idea is that so much has changed that at this point, I would say talk to a service officer, talk to the VA, fill out an application, send it in. You just don't know. So, and of course, that's the bottom line. Fill out the application. The application is available online. I will have these links at the end of the presentation, and in some cases, I'll have links throughout the presentation. But it's a 1010 EZ. You can get it by going to va.gov, or what I recommend is going and getting help from a accredited veteran service officer. And we'll have links where you can find an accredited service officer near you. Okay, I mentioned the priority groups, and we're going to go through all the priority groups, so bear with me. But priority group 1, these are the people that the VA must take care of no matter what. So if funding starts going away, this will be the last group to be touched, is priority group 1. And as you can read, these are people who are rated at least 50% service-connected disability. And if you're not sure what service-connected disability means, that means the VA is compensating the veteran because of a chronic illness or injury that developed as a result of their military service. And like I said, the PACT Act covered a lot of disabilities related to military service that the VA automatically presumes, but the veteran still has to present it, that they have that condition to the VA Benefits Administration. A person who has service-connected disability and the VA has determined that that individual's disabilities make them unemployable, they are in priority group 1. And any veteran who had been who had received from Congress the Medal of Honor, they are also in priority group 1. Priority group 2, real simple, they're persons who are rated 30 or 40% by the VA. Priority group 3, that's what it is. The takeaway from here, if someone's got a Purple Heart, chances are they know they got a Purple Heart. They're going to be eligible. But at the bottom, it says Title 38 USC 1151. 1151 is a rare form of claim, and you're not going to see that too often, but you see it every once in a while. And that means the veteran's injury wasn't from the United States military. Instead, it was from the VA. The VA doesn't have malpractice suits in the traditional sense, and you can go ahead and sue the VA if malpractice is there, but they also have something what we call 1151 claims. And the 1151 claims mean that the individual was harmed either by VA healthcare or VA rehab. An example I've given in the past of that is mail carriers, the old-fashioned mail carrier. They used to walk the neighborhoods and they have the big pouch on their side, and they would reach in with the mail and they deliver it to you. Having that weight on one side of their body over a period of time can cause back problems, and they've proven that. From the health end of it, just taking a wild, for instance, they're going in for a standard procedure, they put them to sleep, and the veteran rolls off the table, hits the floor, and breaks his nose. The broken nose would be considered an 1151 claim. So you're going to see that part of it is extremely rare, but the other ones are pretty much self-explanatory. Priority Group 4, they've done a lot of stories on aid and attendance. If they're granted aid and attendance benefits or housebound benefits as part of the VA pension. And again, we're talking about for veterans. So if a veteran was granted aid and attendance, they're going to be put into VA Healthcare Priority Group 4. And there's another procedure. If you're applying, a lot of times they go and they look at it based on your income and other factors. If you don't fit into any of those other factors, but you have what the VA determines as a catastrophic injury or disability, which makes you pretty much uninsurable, the VA can take you. There's a process to that, and it's a little bit more than the application. Okay. Priority Group 5. I'm sorry, I do have to point out some aid and attendance benefits. Generally, you're going to see those on this is aid and attendance also for veterans who are in Priority Group 1. So, but you can be granted aid and attendance for under service connection. But generally, you're going to see that more of the people who have higher levels of disability. But potentially, it can be granted at lower levels. Okay, now going back here. Okay, so the person isn't service connected, but they meet an income level below the regional limit. Back in 2010, the VA changed some rules, and prior to that, that change in 2010, you were looking at individuals, not only their income, but their assets. So you had to demonstrate your income and assets, and they had to fall below what the VA deemed as eligible for VA healthcare. Income's around 2010. 2010, they said, no, we're going to change this. They dropped off the assets. So an individual who has a vacation home or some other assets, they don't have to report those assets anymore. That's not part of the application. Only income. And the income is based on a regional limit. Your mileage may vary. So depending on where you are when you're watching this, it's going to be based on, from where I am in McHenry County, it's going to be based on the regional limits for the Chicago regional area. Depending on where you are, further west of us, it's going to be based on what you have in the Rockford area, and it goes on and on throughout the country. So I can't put a specific number on that. But again, it goes back to the one big takeaway on this is fill out the application. A person who is service connected at 0%, and yes, 0% is a valid number for service connection. Service connection is awarded based on the average impact of the average individual's ability to earn a wage. So a person could have hearing loss, to the point where they have hearing aids, but the hearing loss isn't sufficient enough to impact employment. So it may be rated at 0. What that means is the VA has to take care of that particular service-connected injury at 0%. And otherwise, the individual has to meet the same category, the same requirements as someone who's non-service connected, except for that 0% injury, say hearing loss. If a veteran's on pension, they're going to be on priority group 5. And if the veteran is eligible for Medicaid programs, they're going to be in category 5. Now the big one, category 6. When the PACT Act was passed, this is where a lot of the changes were made as far as eligibility. So persons in category 6, that's where they put a lot of those changes. So again, service connected, rated at 0%. That's if they're rated at 0%. Let's go back to the other one. This one is 0% and has the income level below the regional limit. Category 6 is just rated 0%. So there's a little difference there. Project SHAD. The purpose of Project SHAD 63 to 74 is the Navy was trying to find weaknesses in our U.S. naval fighting ships as far as their ability to defend against chemical and biological weapons. So there was some testing done to do that. So anybody who participated in that project, and Project 112 was just basically the study of what they were exposed to and everything. That happened later. But SHAD was looking at shipboard hazards related to chemical warfare and biological warfare. Veteran of World War II, not too many left, but there are still some, and I'm glad to see some of them are getting VA healthcare. Service in the Persian Gulf and Camp Lejeune. If you don't know Camp Lejeune, you're not watching TV. But if a person served in Camp Lejeune for at least 30 consecutive days between those dates, they're eligible for VA health care under Category 6. Category 6 continued. Theater of combat, discharged October 1st, 2013, and meets the minimum active duty requirement. Notice the ands in all of this. So they had to serve in the theater of combat after November 11th, 98, and discharge from active duty on or after October 2013, and meets the minimum active duty requirement. And again, your mileage may vary if that applies to you. It's best to sit down and make a determination of whether or not you got that. Okay, more on Group 6. This is some of the stuff that was, again, added as a result of the PACT Act. This is where we're talking about toxins and other environmental hazards during military. And like I said earlier, you had environmental exposures, particularly burn pits, that were in the desert. So those who served in the desert in the Gulf have many presumptives, but they're also going to be eligible for VA health care. So if you have service in either of these areas, or you were exposed to toxins as determined by the VA while you were in the service, then you're going to be eligible for VA health care. Now, a common question I get primarily from some of the older veterans who did not serve in the Gulf is, I was exposed to burn pits too. How come I don't get this? Well, I think the key difference was, and let's just pick Vietnam, even World War II, is one, the size of the burn pit that we have in the Gulf, the typical burn pit, could be acres large. And what they were burning was material that wasn't available to our veterans in World War II or up through Vietnam. stuff like computer components, uranium-weighted ammunition, and other stuff which is found to be hazardous to one's health. Those were examples of things that ended up getting burned in the desert. And that's why there's special consideration for them. Now, were there hazards in World War II and Vietnam in the burn pits? Yes, but we have to look at it differently than what it was there in the desert there. Okay, anybody who served in any of these operations, and the VA, and notice the oars are still there, the VA is saying you get health care from the VA. Again, another addition from the PACT Act. Yeah, this is getting long, and you got our little kitty friend yawning because they're getting tired of seeing this. This is the atomic testing. This was an addition on the VA healthcare priorities as a result of the PACT Act. So some of these are specific to the Air Force and are talking about cleanups. And, some of these cleanups were the result of accidents. So, obviously, except for the first couple, the atomic testing, you have your atomic veterans and the ones who served in Hiroshima and Nagasaki immediately afterwards. And incidentally, I really don't see any of those these days. But, a special note on that, and this is going back to VA disability claims. If your loved one was a veteran who served in Hiroshima or Nagasaki immediately after testing and has died, then the surviving spouse may be eligible for a benefit from the VA. And the same goes with anything that we have talked about briefly that you can get VA health care for because of your participation in these areas. If they died of any of the conditions or as a result of environmental exposures in these areas, prior to this law going into effect, the surviving spouse can apply for and receive a benefit from the VA. And I say can because, again, your mileage may vary, but we have helped many, many surviving spouses get benefits from the VA well past their loved one who was a veteran's passing. And there are certain rules applied to that. So again, you want to speak with a service officer on that. Okay, we're still on 6. This is all related to Agent Orange. And some of the things that surprise people is you've got dates on here that are past when we left Vietnam in 1975. And that's because Agent Orange was still in those special locations. So specifically Guam and American Samoa, there was still Agent Orange in that area. And Johnson Atoll, what does Johnson Atoll have to do with any of this? Well, when they backed out of Vietnam and they were pulling all the Agent Orange out, that's where it went for destruction, was Johnson Atoll. So persons who serve there are going to be automatically assumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange. So the big one here that I see, and certain reservists who served on certain aircraft up until 1980 are also going to be considered exposed. But the territorial waters off of Guam or American Samoa, now more likely than not, you're looking at Navy personnel. But the fact is they can get benefits based on exposure to Agent Orange and herbicides because of this ruling that it was there until 1980. We're finally on category 7. And For category 7 and 8, the common theme in category 7 and 8 is an agreement to pay copays. So at this point, the VA is charging them for health care and for medications, but it's still a good deal. So again, gross household income is below the geographical adjusted limits. A key thing I see people getting in trouble on is the word household. That means not just the veteran, but the veteran's spouse. If the veteran is younger and, has kids in the house, maybe one of them's an actor or something and is making all kinds of money, that has to be included. But primarily what we're going to see with this is the veteran and the veteran's spouse and their combined income, not just the veteran's income. And then they agree to make copays. Category 8, similar. And as I used to call it, these are people who are over the regional limit. And as I've always said, that means they're rich beyond their wildest dreams in the eyes of the VA. You may not feel rich, but in the eyes of the VA, you have sufficient funds to cover your own health care. But if you want to use the VA and the VA can take you, they'll bring you in and you're definitely going to make copays. So we've gotten through all the priority groups. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. But the priority groups kind of explain who they're going to take care of if money starts running out. And of course, 8 will go, then 7, and all the way working up to 1. But right now, if you're not eligible for anything else under any other condition, you may be able to get into Group 8. And if the VA can help you by being in Group 8, fill out the application. We'll be more than happy to get you through that process. I was just thinking that cat looks like one of my cats at home. And that's what I saw this morning. I didn't feed him fast enough. Okay, so what does VA healthcare cost? And again, we're talking primarily category 7 and 8. And as you can see, the most you're paying for regular outpatient visits is going to be $50. It used to be, and I haven't been able to test this in a long time, but it used to be if you could get all your services on the same day, that it would be the most you pay in one day. So if you had 3 specialty care visits in one day, you pay $50. I don't know if that's accurate anymore. But primary care visit, $15, and then $50 for specialty tests and specialty care services. When you look at some of the benefit down here, and this is for inpatient hospital care, that's not a bad deal. Now, a question I commonly get is, won't Medicare pay for this? Well, unfortunately, Medicare and the VA don't exchange money, and that's a function of Congress. But the VA cannot take money from Medicare, and vice versa. So if you're on Medicare, I would say take a look at what your Medicare benefit pays compared to what this. But for some people, this is the best option, is to pay these copays for the VA. And again, the first 90 days of care in this case, and that's what this is, first 90 days of care, $326.40, and then $2 per day. First 90 days of care, category 8, $1,632, and then $10 a day. Okay. And then we're looking at each additional, let's see, did I read that right? First 90 days of care during a 365-day period, that, then if each additional 90 days, it's that. So that's how it works. Okay. And then how much does medical cost? Now keep in mind, if we go back to tier 1, Tier 1 does not pay healthcare medications. Most people in Tier 1 have a 50% disability or greater, and they're not going to pay for medical prescriptions. The rest of us do. So if you are 40% or less or not service connected, this is what you're going to pay for your medications. And typically the VA does this in 90-day supplies. There are some medications that are less than 90 days supplies, and it's based on how many days they can provide you. But most of your stuff, like your blood pressure meds, ulcer medication, you're going to be looking at a 90-day supply. From my own experience, I've yet to see a prescription that costs zero, but I have had medical equipment provided to me at no charge. And we'll get into that a little bit later. In some cases, you may have to have a name brand prescription. And in those cases, you're going to be paying a higher amount. Now, one note about the medications at VA Healthcare, it's based on a formulary. And they do have a chart at the VA where you can look up the medications. And, again, you can go to va.gov and, do a finer search, like, does the formulary carry my medication or something like that? And it'll take you to the chart. You put in the name of your medication, and it'll tell you what tier that medication is in. And it also tell you if you have it. Now I'm going to use an old example of why some of them they don't have. Some of them they break it up into maybe 2 different medications. But at some points, as medical technology gets better, they find they can combine 2 drugs into 1 medication. And maybe the VA hasn't caught up on it. One example I can think of is when they started combining a water pill and the pill for hypertension, high blood pressure. So someone used to be on Lasix and Herbistatin to control their blood pressure. Then they came out with a pill, and I believe it was called Avalide. It was a brand name for it. And it contained both those medications into one. It was a long time before the VA got that on their formulary. Now it is, but up until they got it on their formulary, you were still going to continue to receive the water pill, Lasix, and the Herbistatin as the blood pressure medication. So that would have been 2 pills. Otherwise, if they had to do the name brand, you'd have been paying $33 rather than the 2 pills at $15. But you can find out what medications they have. It's a fantastic deal, and they mail them to you. And so when you go see your VA doctor, you present the information to them. If they agree and they have it in the formulary, they prescribe it to you. And then you can receive it by mail, usually in 90-day supplies. Okay, now what? So you know what the healthcare is, you know how much it's going to cost you, you know what priority group you're going to get. So you turned in your application, it's come back approved, they put you in a priority group. What's next? Well, the next thing is you call your nearest VA and get an appointment. Now, there is a part of the application that says if you're qualified, you want to make an appointment with a primary care physician, and most of the time, the VA is very good about calling you and trying to set up that appointment. Sometimes not. So I always suggest, when you're found eligible, go ahead and call the VA facility you want to work with. It could be a community-based outpatient clinic or a VA hospital, and see if you can't get an appointment with a physician. Now, when you get an appointment with your physician, this is going to be your first appointment. You want to bring your medications that you are currently prescribed. You also want to provide your medical history and get a routine physical. And at that point, you can request specialty clinics. VA healthcare works very similar to an HMO. Everything's going to be directed by the primary care doctor. Now, primary care doctors, again, your mileage may vary. My experience, the experience of many people I talk to, is they're very good that if you have a medical need to go to one of these specialty clinics, they're going to send you, and they're very liberal about doing that. So if you feel you need to go see a podiatrist, you talk to your primary care doctor, they send a referral over to podiatry, you get to go see a podiatrist. Another common question I get at this, so I'm starting to use the VA, does that mean I give up my primary care doctor on the outside? And the answer to that question is not if you don't want to. All I recommend is make sure that the VA doctor knows you have a primary care doctor on the outside that's calling all the shots, and you're just maintaining a health record at the VA and getting your prescriptions filled by them, if you can. I also recommend you keep your outside primary care physician informed of what you're doing at the VA. And the reason for this is you want to make absolutely sure, especially if there's changes in medications, that both doctors know what the VA is providing and what the primary care doctor that you typically use on the outside is providing, because some medications simply don't mix. So you want to have the list on both of them so they don't make a mistake of giving you one medication that may cancel out the effect of another one. So that's just make sure it's your care. You want the best possible care. If you like your doctor on the outside, fine. I would still go to get a physical at the VA at least annually. And I even made a note about that. I'm smarter than I think. So why do I want you to go to the VA at least annually, even though you have an outside doctor and maybe you don't want to use the VA right away? Well, let's say we talked about catastrophic conditions as far as healthcare earlier. And let's say something like that had happened, or you find that you become unemployable or uninsurable, and now the VA is your only choice. You don't want to walk into a VA healthcare or any doctor that doesn't have, where you can't present them a medical history of what's been going on. With the VA, if you at least get those annual physicals at the VA at least once a year, then they have a running record of what you've looked like over a period of time. So if you're suddenly catastrophically or have a catastrophic health problem, they know what their goal is to bring you back to, rather than you being enrolled because of a catastrophic health problem and then them trying to get you back to whatever level of ability you had prior to that medical issue. So I do recommend, and I tell this to our younger veterans, go to the VA at least once a year, if not, use it regularly. Very good program, very good care. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the departments within the VA, and I like to start with prosthetics. Usually when people think prosthetics, the first thing they think of is artificial limbs. But prosthetics from the VA perspective and from many other departments' perspective is prosthetics and sensory aid services. So it's not just the artificial arms and legs and being able to help someone get used to using that new artificial limb. It's all kinds of different things. A real common one, hearing aids. People who are getting hearing aids for the first time, they need to understand how they work, and they got to get them sized. Prosthetics is the department that's going to help them do that. One thing that I've always found interesting, service dog health insurance. If the VA provides a service dog, they can also provide health insurance for the dog. So you're not going to bring your dog to the VA for care, but you do want to have insurance where you can bring them to a veterinarian who accepts that insurance. Other things, and these are a lot of, I want to mention a lot of these things, you can talk to the primary care doctor at the VA about getting. Automobile modifications, you're generally going to be getting that because you have some kind of disability that prevents you from using your lower limbs. So you have little hand controls and stuff like that. So there has to be a clinical need to do that. Clothing allowance, again, it has to be a clinical need. So obviously, or maybe you don't know, artificial limbs can be very difficult on your clothing. Just the artificial joints moving past the material can wear them out prematurely. But there are also other medical conditions, such as certain types of infections, which can ruin the clothing as well. So that's where you'd get a clothing allowance. HISA grants, home improvement and structural authorizations, a quick word about that. Some people, as they get reduced mobility, find it difficult to get around the house or need additional help with some modifications to their house. This can be done at VA healthcare. It's not a special VA loan, but VA healthcare can help you with that. And maybe it's remodeling the bathroom so you could have better use of it. In some cases, I've seen a stair lift put in because the only bathroom in the house was on the second floor. So that helps the veteran get up to the second floor. But that's something that can be used to help the veteran stay in their home and be able to use the home better. Ramps, that's not part of HISA, although I think it certainly could be, but they actually have different funding for ramps. So if an individual has a problem mobily, and this is regardless of whether or not they're service connected for the condition. If it is a medical need and you need a structural authorization or you need a ramp to get into your house, you can talk to your VA healthcare primary care doctor, and they can refer you to get these things. Motorized wheelchairs, very popular item. And for many of us, and you can see the walls in this office in some cases where we've got a narrow spot, we're going to fix that. But the prosthetics will actually make sure that the individual receiving the motorized wheelchair knows how to use the motorized wheelchair before they deliver it to their home. And there's so many other things that prosthetics provides. The big thing is simply ask your VA primary care doctor. I'm going to take an example from myself. I went in for my annual physical and was concerned that my blood pressure was going up per my blood pressure machine, despite the medication I've been on for years that manages it really well. And they said, it doesn't seem right. They went to the back room, came back and handed me a new blood pressure machine that I could take home with me, like the ones you can get at one of the CVS or Walgreens. So these are things the VA can provide you when you're in VA healthcare. TENS unit is another one to help treat chronic pain. So there are other things that they can provide based on medical need. And that's why I wanted a slide specific to this, is because you got healthcare and then you've got devices associated with healthcare. And prosthetics is a wonderful place, and they have all kinds of things that can help you out as long as you have the need. Okay, moving on. Community care. Perhaps you've heard about community care and how the VA can provide services outside of the VA hospital. Probably it's not going to affect the area where I am in the Chicago regional area, but for other places in the country, Where a VA facility may be greater than 40 miles away, the VA can now refer that person to community care. And these are doctors paid for by the VA, just like it says. Sometimes there's a copay, sometimes they're not. We'll get into that in another slide. But oftentimes, VA healthcare will also do this if they're trying to get you into a specialty clinic, and either they don't have that specialty in the hospital or in the facility near you, or the time frame to see that individual is uncomfortably long, in which case they'll refer you to the outside. And again, I'm going to give an example from my own experience. I was referred to community care because I wanted a second opinion based on a condition I had outside, and I wanted an opinion outside of what the VA's opinion was, and they sent me to a doctor in community care to give a second opinion, and it was very helpful. And honestly, when I was done, it turned out the person who gave me the exam was a vet, and I talked to him about a filing for veterans benefits. But that's a different story. The idea is, though, that the VA is recognizing that they can't be everything to everyone, and they can go out and provide you with care outside depending on your situation. And like I said, typically it's going to be for some specialized services, but also it can be because you live in an area where you're too far away from a VA facility. Urgent care. This is one of these things that has started that I'm constantly running into veterans who had no idea they could go to urgent care. So the VA has a website, and I have that listed up here, and you'll see it on several slides, but I recommend you write it down and go to it, or there's a number which I can also provide. But it is where you can find urgent care nearby. So, let's say you have the flu. You don't want to wait to get an appointment at your VA doctor to take care of the flu. You want to do something about it now. You can look up and see which urgent care facility has a contract with the VA. And in many cases, especially if you're in categories 1 through 6, you don't have to pay anything for this. The VA will cover it. And I actually put this to test myself. I'm in one of the categories between 1 and 6. I tested it myself when I thought I had COVID again. And I went to an urgent care facility. It was a simple matter of me letting them know I was a patient of the VA. They called the VA to confirm, got an authorization. I was seen, and I did not get a bill. So it worked out wonderful. And again, it was in a location that was very close to me. So it worked out really well. Again, your mileage may vary depending on where you live and what kind of agreements they have with urgent care. Now, they also have agreements with hospital emergency rooms, but if it's an urgent care matter and you go to an emergency room, the VA isn't going to cover it. Another issue is some people who are farther away from a VA and don't find it convenient to go to the VA try to use urgent care as a replacement for primary care. Well, the VA will pick up on that pretty quick, and they won't authorize it. So the urgent care is used for urgent care. Emergency care is used for emergent care, which brings us to our next slide. What's what? So what is urgent care? When do I go there? And when do I go to emergency care? And again, you're going to urgent care for stuff that you need to take care of right away. Maybe it's a bad cold, maybe it's the flu, maybe it's pneumonia. You don't know. If you can get in your car and drive because you're not passed out, then you can go to urgent care. They say minor broken bones in here, and I had a deep thought on that one. And the example I can give on a minor broken bone, maybe a broken toe or something like that, if it's a clean fracture in the broken toe and it hurts like crazy, even though they can't do anything, and it looks like a toe, it's not bent in an odd position, then that's probably an urgent care. If you fall on the ground and you get up and you say, gee, my arm hurts, I wonder if I broke my arm, and it hurts, but you're kind of got that question mark in your head, did I bruise it or did I break it? Probably urgent care. If you've got a bone sticking out of your skin, I would call that emergency care. Bottom line is, if you believe your medical problem is life-threatening, then you're going to go to the ER. If you don't think it's life-threatening, you'll go to urgent care. Minor burns, that could be tricky. And I'll give you an example in the next slide. Okay, again, trouble breathing, falling, and having no idea why. All these things are important that you would go to emergency care. And again, I got the location up here where you can find them. Hopefully you won't be spending time trying to explain to the ambulance, if you're taking an ambulance, of which emergency room you want to go to. Generally, you want to go to the nearest one and get it taken care of. I like to share a story about chest pain and discomfort and why it's so important to go to that. Early on in my career, and again, I've been doing this over 25 years, I had a veteran call asking for transportation to the VA Medical Center because, the wife called because he had really, really bad chest pains. And I'm talking bad chest pains where it feels like somebody is sitting on your chest. I said, at the time, we didn't have a vehicle running and I couldn't get anybody. I said, we can't take you. And besides, it sounds like you need to go to the ER right now. And they complained. And I said, well, look, you need to go to the ER. And I thought I convinced her. And a couple hours later, I get a phone call. We're on our way to the VA hospital, and I think we're lost. Can you help us find it? My husband is in a great deal of pain. And again, I told the individual, you need to go to an emergency room. Stop what you're doing, find the nearest hospital and go to the emergency room. Didn't hear from him the rest of the day, figured this has been taken care of. She finally convinced him to go to the emergency room. Incidentally, their barrier was they didn't want to pay for an emergency room because they're expensive. So they wanted to go to the VA instead. Next morning, I got a phone call. My husband's really in a lot of pain. He didn't sleep all night. I said, lady, if you don't call 911, I'll call for you. And she goes, well, he doesn't want to pay for a hospital. And I said, well, what about paying for a funeral? Those aren't cheap either. I'm pretty confident she called 911 at that point. Now, I talked about another one, which was burns. And you have to be careful about what kind of burn you're bringing into them, because some burns that may seem minor actually really aren't. And again, this is going to prove I was safer in the military than I was when I got out. I was working on a switch. It had a rheostat attached to it, which could adjust the amount of voltage going into it. It was wired incorrectly, and it sent an arc across the index web, which is between your forefinger and your thumb, and put a nice burn in that section right there. And I said, wow, that hurts. And at the time, there wasn't an urgent care nearby, so I went to the emergency room. Turns out I made the right choice. And it happens to be because for the type of burn I had and where it was, if it healed wrong, it can permanently impact how much motion I had in my thumb. And by the time they got done bandaging me up, it looked like I was wearing a boxing glove on that hand. So again, use common sense. If you're having symptoms of a stroke, don't go to urgent care, go to the emergency room. And hopefully that doesn't need to be said. Head injury, I would say any kind of head injury. It wasn't too long ago, a few years ago, there was a celebrity who went skiing and hit their head. They thought they were fine, no problem. Witnesses said they were fine. Trip was over. She goes home and she dies because of trauma to her head that she didn't realize happened as a result of that accident. So, not to put the fear of God into everybody, but if you have a head injury, it's probably a good idea to go to an emergency room and get it checked out, because concussions can cause bad problems and you don't know if you created a deeper problem in there just because it's not bothering you now. Okay, what's this going to cost? Okay, so in urgent care, categories 1 through 5, and some of the ones who are in 6 will receive 3 visits a year at no charge, after which it's going to be $30 a visit in urgent care. Groups 7 and 8, you're going to make a copay of $30 for each visit to urgent care. Again, urgent care is not a replacement for a primary care physician. You've got a minor illness or injury. Well, I wouldn't call a flu minor, but you've got a illness or injury that can be taken care of at urgent care. In most cases, a flu can be taken care of. If you have the flu so bad you're having difficulty breathing, then maybe you need to go to an ER. Okay, the ER, it's covered, but, and one of the key things in there, and I got the phone number, if you need to go to the emergency room, the VA has to, and you're a patient of the VA, they have to be informed right away, usually within 72 hours. And the things they're going to consider is how close are you to a VA emergency room? Well, I can say most people aren't that close. If you're within 5 minutes of a VA emergency room, you're going to probably want to go to the emergency room at the VA. But if you're 40 minutes away, you're going to want to go to the nearest emergency room. The means test for that is if you're having a medical or emergency, and average Joe on the street would conclude that, yes, this is indeed an emergency, and the VA ER is too far, you need to go to the nearest emergency room, then you go to the emergency room. And again, we got the fine locations again for VA. I think the big thing to take away from this is you need to keep the VA informed. You can't get checked into the hospital and you're ready to leave. Oh yeah, I got to call the VA, because that's not going to work. You need to call them right away, let them know. If you need to let the hospital know that you're a patient of the VA so they can act on it as well, because the emergency rooms can often take care of that. Now, what happens when they stabilize you? And again, I'm going to provide an example from actual life. We had a visitor who was out camping nearby, had a massive heart attack, was taken to the nearest facility, emergency room, and the VA was informed. The individual needed surgery immediately, and unfortunately, the hospital that he was taken to didn't have a medical team ready to take him. However, another facility in Barrington, I won't name the hospital, did have a surgical team that was ready to go. So they got him stable, put him on a flight to life, and flew him over there. And by the time his wife caught up to him, he was already under the knife. What did the VA pay? The VA paid that portion up until he was stabilized and could be transported elsewhere. The mistake made was when he was stabilized and was capable of being transported elsewhere, they did not call the VA to let him know he's stable enough to move. However, he needs to get surgery. And the VA's response was that same helicopter that took him to the facility in Barrington could have taken him to a facility at Hines. The question of whether or not a surgical team was ready was not raised because he was considered stable. And the VA did not cover the transfer. So you need to keep the VA informed of everything. And I'll say this actually happened to my father as well, where he was transferred to a facility that was right next to Hines VA Medical Center. So obviously, he could have gone from where he was in McHenry to the Hines VA Medical Center when they needed to transfer him, and they chose to send him to a facility very close to Hines instead of Hines. So the VA did not pay for that care once he got into the other facility. And that's my dad, and there was nothing I could do about it because that's what the rules are. Okay. Mental health care services. I can say I'm very proud of the mental health care services provided at the VA. That's the experience I've had with most of my clients. Not everybody likes it, but I find that a majority of our clients who use VA healthcare are very pleased with the mental health care services they receive. They do have very good doctors and counselors. The question is the same question we have outside the VA. It turns out there is a shortage of psychiatrists, psychologists, and clinicians who can actually help with mental health. And compared to the large number of mental health needs there are in the country today, they do a very good job. Their telehealth, I use their telehealth for other things. They also have telehealth for mental health. If you're open to it, they can find an available doctor from elsewhere in the country that can help you out using telehealth. And it's a fabulous thing, but it's not the right thing for everybody. But I do recommend it. In fact, later this week, I'll be meeting my primary care doctor via telehealth. And I think it's great because I don't have to leave the office. I can continue to work and do the things I enjoy doing the most, which is helping other veterans get their stuff taken care of and have a minimal interruption in my day because I get to see my doctor online rather than going to an office. I already had the testing done that he needed. So all it is going over everything, but it's great. The VA also has vet centers. So if you're a combat vet, that's one of the provisions in there. If you're a combat veteran, worked in mortuary services, which is basically escorting veterans who died or were killed in action to their resting place, or if you're a veteran who suffered MST in service, military sexual trauma, there's a number to call. You can use the vet centers. The vet centers are fantastic. They are loosely connected to the VA, but not really. They're really more a form of community care. There are vet centers throughout the area, and they are very, very helpful for mental health issues. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, another excellent organization that can help out and with a veteran who's having some issues, but not just the veteran, but veterans' family members. And I do need to point that out. Some of these service includes assistance for veterans' family members as well, especially in those cases where the household stress is related to the veteran's mental health issue. On a note on NAMI, we recently have an agreement with our office, and NAMI McHenry County to deliver mental health first aid. So for those of you who aren't concerned about a mental health issue, don't have a mental health issue, mental health first aid is something that is probably right nowadays just as important as knowing Red Cross first aid, for instance. Mental health first aid, you would get trained and you receive a certificate, much like you would get from Red Cross first aid. And it helps you get familiar with some of the problems and teaches you how you can help somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis or a mental health issue. Very important thing that's being done today. And as far as the commission here in McHenry County, a commitment was made to teach as many McHenry County residents as possible and some of the outside agencies on mental health first aid so they can deliver mental health first aid to somebody who may need it. And the reason that's done and why I'm even bringing up mental health in the first place is the numbers of veterans who are dying by suicide is still very, very high. I get a report from McHenry County, and right now, 20% of the people who died by suicide or overdose this year, and they included the overdose ones because there was evidence that it was a suicide, 20% of them have been military veterans. And a lot of the total number was over age 55. So this is a problem that spans all ages, but it especially hits veterans hard. So that's why the commission is so set on bringing this to the attention of the general public. And the other things is, and this applies to everybody, there is a mental health crisis line. It's 988 Veterans Hit Option 1. And they'll get you into, they can help you. They have counselors and they can help you on the spot or get you referred. Local mental health boards. We're blessed in McHenry County. Lake County also has one. There's several counties that have mental health boards. Those are really good to have. I have had active duty service members who didn't trust the VA to do it because they didn't want to affect their careers. They didn't want the military to do it. I've been able to link them up with local mental health boards who have been able to provide them confidential services. Local mental health boards are there to help as well. And you get to check your local phone book or the internet to see if there's a mental health board that you can reach out to for assistance as well. So mental health is a big issue. It is one that, to give you an example, we haven't seen mental health care numbers like this since the 1970s when it was the highest it had ever been. And these numbers are getting very close to what we've seen in the mid to later 1970s. So it's been a long time since we've had this kind of a problem in the country. And with all the stress and the environment that we're living in today, and the fact that things change so quickly, of course, there's going to be some stress and it could cause some mental health concerns. So without getting into statistics, if you or a loved one thinks they're having a problem with mental health, you can call the crisis line. You can reach out to your NAMI, the closest NAMI, or you can reach to a local mental health board, and you don't have to be a veteran for that. If you're a veteran, I highly suggest going to the vet center or reaching out to the VA for help. Okay. So this is going to conclude our mental health care, our VA healthcare presentation. We went over a lot. This is being taped, so you can actually see it multiple times. If there is something you've missed and you can be advanced ahead. Again, our phone number is on this page. There's also other VACs. If you're in the state of Illinois, you can look up veteransbenefits.org and it'll show you if there's a VAC and where you're at. VA Health Services, there's that line again. And if you'd like help applying for VA healthcare or mental health issues, there's a phone number for that. I thank you very much, and I thank Elderworks for putting on this program. And if you have any further questions, problems, concerns, feel free to reach out to our office at 815-334-4229, or if you're close to another Veterans Assistance Commission, there are people there who'd be more than happy to help. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day.